Hi, my name is Guillermo, founder of Breeze Real Estate, and today I want to talk about the most common scams when buying real estate here in Mexico. So let's go to the computer and check it out. Okay, so you are buying property at the Riviera Maya. Please don't get born in paradise because, yeah, it happens. Here and pretty much all around the world, people are just trying to make a quick buck. So let's analyze how the risk happen or how the scams happen and what are the risks involved when buying real estate here in Mexico. So let's first look at the risk landscape. So we have some analysis around 2023 and 2024 on what are the most common issues reported. The first one, as you can see, is the ejido. The ejido basically is communal land, and a lot of people try to sell that as private property. This cannot be done. You need first to detach the communal property to make it private property and then sell it as private property. This is a complex process and you need to do it at the Registro Nacional Agrario, which is the institution in Mexico that manages pretty much all ejidos, and they are the only one that can move the communal property to private property. It's pretty much half of the scams or the risk that happen when buying real estate here in Mexico. The second one is the pre-construction delays or failures. Well, this happens normally because the developers are not that well financially, or they are new developers. They just trust that they will sell all the project in time record, but life happens. After COVID, everything was a boom, then become the bust. Uh, and it happens. Sometimes the market just go down, sales are slow, but these developers doesn't finish the projects because they don't have the expertise or the right financial structure to actually finish the projects. It happens and is the second most common issue here at the Riviera Maya. The third one, the rental promise fraud. Well, this is a risk that happens when you buy a property and you assume that you are going to rent it and it's going to be a business, but the reality is other. Then we have double sales. Double sales are, this is a this is the scam, right? Like nobody wants to buy a property and somebody else is buying the same property and somebody else is buying the same property as well. Normally, to do this scam, you need to forge titles. You need to actually commit fraud, like a real fraud. It's not that common, but it happens. It's pretty much 10% of all reports here at the Riviera Maya. And then we have others. So basically, you have ejido irregularities, you have pre-construction delays. This is what happened after COVID in Tulum, and that's why a lot of people kind of hate Tulum because of this. I mean, you can buy good properties in Tulum right now because sales are slowing down, prices are getting lower, but it is a risk as well. Then this rental guarantee trap, we can see the realistic ROI and the promised ROI for this specific trap. So we observe that sometimes people say, oh yeah, a luxury condo in Tulum is going to give you 50% of ROI, blah, blah, blah. But then reality is about 7, right? But with a 7%, you rather put your money into the stock market. So I don't know. Then in Playa, we have a similar scenario. And in Puerto Morelos, which is a developing area, it's growing a lot. Like if you want to buy a property, look at Puerto Morelos right now. It's a hot area at the moment in the real estate environment here in Mexico. But the reality is that if you want to do the rental business, short-term rental business, you need to understand that it is a business. It requires a lot of human effort, and if you are not willing to do that, just don't buy a property for that. Okay, let's move on. So we talk about the most common scams. Here we have another summary. The hidden land trap, as I mentioned, this is pretty much, this happens when people from the ejido or like fake real estate agents offer this land and they try to sell it as private property, but they have only one document which is called cesión de derechos. So the cesión de derechos is a document that the ejido gives to their, like to the community, because they have the right to inhabit that land, they have the right to develop that land, and they have the right to actually work that land. Ejido was born as part of giving back to the communities the land that it was stolen, like back in the 60s, 70s. So the idea was to make, like rural areas in Mexico, productive areas by just having this structure where people that actually farm the land were kind of owners of the land as well. So you need to be careful. If somebody told you, oh yeah, I have the cesión de derechos, you are not buying property, you are just buying a document, and sometimes you are not even buying that, because in the agrarian law or leyes agrarias, the wife, the family, they are the first ones that have rights over the property, right? Because it's part of the community. So be careful on that. Then we have the phantom sale. These phantom pre-sales basically means that they just collect money, the pre-sale money, and they just go bankrupt. This happens quite often, to be honest. It happens for new developers, because here in Mexico, everybody wants to be a developer, everybody wants to be a real estate agent, but they are not professional about it. They don't know how to finance it, they don't know how to sell it, and they just end up committing a fraud. We already talked about the rental guarantee. This more like an scam is, like overselling. You are overselling a project and you guarantee some ROI, but we know it is a business. It depends on demand and offer. And sometimes, like the Caribbean last year had a lot of sargassum, which is this algae that makes the beach doesn't look as pretty or Instagram as regular. So you don't have a lot of flies coming here to the Riviera Maya, you don't have occupancy rates, so there is no business on that. I mean, it is a business if you manage it properly, if you actually hire a real property manager, or if you are a property manager, it can be a business, but it's not a guarantee that you will make money on these kind of deals, right? Finally, we talk about the double sale. The double sale it's difficult. As I mentioned, you need to be you will be like the person that commits this fraud, like it's a criminal because he's forging documents. Actually, even I have been part of this. I mean, I've been scammed in this way. It was interesting. Like before, actually deep diving into real estate some years ago, I tried to buy some land, and yeah, I was scammed with this. This is super interesting because it is a fraud. Actually, the fraud that was made to me made the news. It was presented by the president of Mexico because they pretty much sell an island. They just forge the documents. They say, "Oh yeah, I'm the rightful owner of this island." They sold it. Yeah, everything was fake. There were a lot of government people involved on that. So I mean, it happens. It's not as common, but it happens. And then we have the shadow flipping. So in this case, an agent adds a markup to the price without the seller owning. And like they are just trying to make a quick buck. They just say, okay, the price of this property is $100K, but we are going to add furniture, blah, 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 and it's going to be 110K. But the catch is that the regular price already includes the furniture because it was a turnkey development, right? So, this is part of some unscrupulous real estate agents. It happens, but you just need to be super, super cautious to whom you work. So how to avoid it? Well, Mexico has a robust legal framework, to be honest, to protect buyers, but you need to follow it step by step. Sometimes you try to save some money, but it just backfires and you end up losing capital. So the first step is a formal offer letter. In this case, you will sign something called oferta de compra, which is The initial step is an initial document that you will sign. This will create, you know, some kind of history between you and the other party. In this case, you should never pay directly to the seller. Always, please always use an escrow account if possible that freezes the price, and they have, well, the job of the escrow as well is just to verify that some points, legal appointments or construction appointments, just comply with the, the real buying offer. So always use an escrow account. The second one is a legal due diligence. In this case, you want to do which is called a title search. Here in Mexico, we have something called registro público or public registry. Basically, you just go to the building, say, oh, I want to do a search. Just stay behind a computer. You kind of look by the key. In this case, the key will be a number that is in the escritura pública, on the public deed. You can look it for name, you can look for the name of the owner, and you can do kind of like a lot of queries just to make sure that the person that is selling the property is the rightful owner. Then you can have a promissory contract. Well, this promissory contract or contrato de promesa de compraventa actually is the final, let's say, final document when buying, right? Because in this document, you have the detailed terms, you have the penalties, you have the specs, you have the details of the property, you have the details of the financing, if some. But yeah, this is a binding agreement and normally requires 30% of payment of down payment, but ensures that all the clauses, that everything is on legal terms. And if, well, it normally, like, it's negotiable with some developers. Well, it should be with all of the developers, but you know, it's a red flag if the developer doesn't want to make changes to the contract. So yeah, just make sure that this promissory contract is well structured and the developer has penalties, you have penalties if something goes out of hand, or the deal doesn't complete. Yeah, there are some penalties involved in this document, but you should read it. Like, a lawyer should approve this document. And finally, as a foreigner, you need the closing and the fideicomiso, because in the Riviera Maya, everything is below this limit of 50 kilometers. You need to create a fideicomiso, right? Because according to Mexican law, like, foreigners cannot own land in this area. But you know, there are some different ways to do it. One is to set up a Mexican corporation, because then a Mexican entity, Mexican legal entity can buy a property, or you can set up a fideicomiso, which is the most suggested way to do it. Is the standard process, to be honest. This is done with a bank, and then the notario público sign the escritura or the deed. The fideicomiso owns the land, but you own the fideicomiso, so basically you are the owner, right? So it is not that complex, to be honest. It's pretty much a bank trust, and with this, you can actually legally own property here in Mexico. Finally, let's go to a checklist of red flags. If the seller insists on cash payments, that's a red flag. If the seller refuses to go or to use a notario público, like, that's a completely red flag. All the transactions or the real estate transactions in Mexico happen when a notario público signs the deed and transfers the property. When the property is listed as ejidal, I mean, it's a red flag, it is a risk, but sometimes if you have the right lawyers, it can be a good sale. But if you are a novice in this of real estate here in Mexico, or you are not familiar with how the law works, just avoid this type of deals. Then, as I was mentioning, you need to check the track record. So if the developer has no completed projects, that's a red flag. Like, there are a lot of new developers. I mean, like, there are some, you know, influencer developers that they sell courses to make everybody a developer. So just be aware that a lot of people will try to sell or push these projects into you, and be careful. if they promise an ROI, like, like this is basic finance, if people are just talking to you about unrealistic returns, just be aware. When the price is 30% below the market value, okay, yeah, this is another way that some people get scammed when buying real estate here in Mexico. When the price is too low, it can be possible that you are not buying the property, you are buying the rights of a legal battle between the owner of the title and the bank, right? Because they didn't pay the property, so the bank has the legal rights to sell that property. But like it's kind of complex. I'm not going to talk about that in this video, but if the price is below 30% of the market, that's a red flag. When the contract is only available in English, that's something interesting. It's not valid in Mexican courts. So just be careful, right? So for example, let's just say that my seller insists on cash payments. The property is ejidal. He has no projects and the price is below market, so the risk is critical, right? The most red flags you have, the less viable this transaction will be. So just be careful, and please do not forget that this happens all times here in Mexico. Just be careful and be safe. Okay, so we have explored pretty much all the red flags in projects and some of the most common scams as well, and how to avoid them. So if you want a professional advisory on how to buy real estate here in Mexico, just contact me and see you in the next video.